A wild vegetable can cover an entire forest floor and still be almost impossible to find on a plate. Rarity is not always a low plant count. It can mean an edible stage measured in days, a habitat protected from harvesting, or knowledge carried by only a small number of communities. Near the end, one bulb will make that distinction impossible to ignore. The edible species may grow beside a poisonous look-alike. Before we reach it, choose the kind of rarity that interests you more. Comment time if a disappearing season fascinates you, or knowledge if forgotten identification does. The first plant is rare for a more uncomfortable reason. People learn to love it faster than it could recover. Wild ramps. These woodland onions emerge across eastern North America before the forest canopy closes, filling the damp spring air with the smell of garlic and sweet onion. Their leaves remain useful for only a short season, but the deeper limit is underground. A ramp grown from seed may require 5 to 7 years to reach harvestable maturity, while removing the bulb takes away the entire plant. Research on natural populations has shown why casual advice such as "take only a few" can be dangerously vague. One frequently cited model proposed harvesting about 10% of a patch no more than once every 10 years, and even that depends on local conditions. Ramps are therefore not rare everywhere, yet a crowded forest colony can create a false impression of abundance. Popularity can empty a patch far faster than the patch can rebuild itself. Another spring plant avoids that exact problem because only its new growth is eaten, but it replaces the harvesting question with a food safety question. Ostrich fern fiddleheads. The edible part is not a separate vegetable, but a temporary stage in the life of an ostrich fern. For a few weeks, each new frond remains tightly coiled, covered by a loose brown papery husk, and marked by a deep groove along its smooth stem. Once the coil opens, the texture changes, and the familiar fiddlehead disappears. The flavor is often compared with asparagus, green beans, and broccoli, which makes it sound easy to use, but the preparation is unusually strict. Other ferns may be toxic or carcinogenic, and even correctly identified ostrich fern fiddleheads have been connected with illness when eaten raw or undercooked. Health Canada advises boiling them for 15 minutes or steaming them for 10 to 12 minutes, then discarding the cooking water. Fiddleheads are rare on a calendar more than on a map. Miss the correct growth stage and the vegetable becomes a fern. Time creates the first kind of scarcity. The coast introduces a scarcity shaped by physical access. Sea samphire. Rock samphire survives where an ordinary vegetable garden would fail, rooting in cracks along sea cliffs around the Mediterranean, the Black Sea, and Atlantic Europe. Its thick leaves conserve moisture against salt spray, wind, and summer heat, producing a sharp flavor that can suggest fennel, celery, citrus peel, and pickle brine at the same time. Historically, the difficult habitat was part of the price. Shakespeare used samphire gathering on the cliffs of Dover as an image of a dangerous trade, because collectors sometimes worked above steep drops to reach it. The plant can be eaten fresh, lightly cooked, or preserved in vinegar, but the modern obstacle is no longer just the cliff. Many coastal populations grow in protected habitats where gathering may be restricted or inappropriate. Sea samphire shows that a plant may be biologically tough while remaining commercially fragile. Below those cliffs, tidal mud produces a similarly named vegetable with a completely different structure and history. Glasswort. Often sold as marsh samphire, glasswort is not the same plant as rock samphire. It grows in salt marshes and tidal flats, forming jointed, leafless-looking stems that concentrate the taste of the sea. Young stems are crisp enough to eat raw in modest portions, or to cook briefly, usually without additional salt. Yet its English name preserves a second identity. Long before chefs treated it as a coastal delicacy, mineral-rich glasswort was burned to produce soda ash for glass and soap making. Industrial chemistry eventually replaced that use, while coastal cuisine preserved the plant as food. Its scarcity is highly local. One estuary may hold dense green carpets, while inland consumers may never see a fresh stem because it loses moisture quickly and comes from sensitive habitat. If you could taste only one coastal plant, comment rock for rock samphire or marsh for glasswort. Wild food can disappear, even when its habitat remains productive, because sometimes the missing part is not the plant, but the memory of using it. Miner's lettuce. This western North American annual can be abundant enough to form green carpets on moist ground, so calling the plant itself rare would be inaccurate. What is rare is its place in the modern diet. Its most recognizable leaves form a round disc around a flower stem, creating a shape that looks almost designed rather than grown. The tender leaves, stems, and blossoms may be eaten raw or cooked, and their vitamin C content gave them practical value long before nutritional labels existed. Indigenous peoples used the plant as food, and settlers later ate it to help prevent scurvy, which explains the gold rush name. None of that created a lasting commercial system. The leaves are delicate, the harvest is seasonal, and a plant that succeeds locally offers little advantage to a distributor who already has durable lettuce varieties. Miner's lettuce demonstrates an important distinction. Common in an ecosystem does not mean common as food. Another forgotten green reached the opposite problem. It was once cultivated precisely because it was useful, then lost its role when modern vegetables became easier to standardize. Good King Henry. For centuries, this perennial supplied European households with 2 vegetables from one plant. Tender spring shoots could be prepared like asparagus, while the arrow-shaped leaves served as a spinach-like green. Its value was not luxury but timing. It returned early, required relatively little replanting, and filled a seasonal gap when cottage gardens had fewer options. Then agriculture changed the comparison. Commercial spinach offered more familiar leaves, asparagus became a specialized crop, and Good King Henry was left without a clear identity in the market. Today it persists in old settlements, heritage gardens, and naturalized populations, carrying names such as wild spinach and Lincolnshire asparagus that remember its former roles. The plant did not become biologically rare in one sudden collapse. It became culturally obsolete, which can make a food disappear almost as effectively. In the southern Appalachians, another spring green reveals how access to wild food can be shaped not only by markets, but by history, law, and the survival of community knowledge. Sochan. Also known as green-headed coneflower, Sochan grows near streams and moist openings across much of eastern North America. The plant can reach several feet in height, but Cherokee gatherers value the tender early leaves, particularly the 3 terminal lobes known as the turkey foot. For the eastern band of Cherokee Indians, this is not simply an unusual salad green. Spring gathering carries ecological knowledge, family memory, and a relationship with ancestral land. Development reduced Sochan habitat around the Qualla boundary, while the creation of Great Smoky Mountains National Park placed productive gathering grounds behind federal restrictions. Until 2019, Cherokee people were prohibited from gathering Sochan inside the park. A monitored agreement now allows a limited number of permitted tribal members to harvest during a defined season, and research has so far found no negative effect on plant growth under those rules. Sochan may be common as a species, yet access to it as a living food tradition is unusually narrow. If rarity can belong to culture as well as biology, comment culture. If rarity should describe only the plant population, comment biology. Access is one filter, but chemistry creates another. Wood sorrel. 3 heart-shaped leaflets make wood sorrel look enough like clover to invite casual assumptions, while its sharp lemon flavor makes it memorable after a single taste. That acidity comes from oxalic acid, the same broad chemical family associated with the tartness of several familiar plants. Leaves, flowers, and tender seed pods have been used in small quantities to brighten salads and sauces, but wood sorrel is better understood as a seasoning than as a bowl of greens. Large amounts are inappropriate, particularly for people advised to limit oxalates because of kidney conditions. Its worldwide distribution makes the plant common, yet its culinary role remains rare, because the useful dose is small. The leaves collapse quickly after picking, and identification cannot responsibly be reduced to one photograph of 3 leaflets. Here, rarity is not a lack of plants or flavor. It is the narrow space between a useful accent and an irresponsible serving. A more economic kind of scarcity appears when the edible portion is safe and desirable, but every shoot must be selected by hand. Hop shoots. Beer made the hop plant globally familiar, but its edible spring growth remains almost invisible. Before a hop vine begins climbing, soft shoots push from the underground crown. Gathered while still short and tender, they can be blanched, sautéed, or or cooked with butter, developing an earthy bitterness often compared with asparagus and nuts. The strange economics begin immediately. A field can produce valuable hop flowers later in the season, so removing too many early shoots may weaken growth or reduce the crop that growers actually depend upon. Wild shoots are scattered, cultivated shoots compete with a more profitable product, and the harvest cannot easily be mechanized because each usable tip must be judged for tenderness. Their high price in parts of Europe is therefore not proof that the plant is rare. It is the price of a tiny harvest window, slow hand labor, and an opportunity cost hidden in every stem. Labor can make a common plant expensive. Misidentification can make an edible plant too risky for casual Camas Bulb. Across the seasonally wet meadows of western North America, blue camas once supported extensive systems of food production and trade. Indigenous communities did not merely stumble upon the bulbs. They managed meadows, selected productive plants, controlled harvest timing, removed dangerous lookalikes, and cooked the bulbs in earth ovens. Traditional pit cooking could continue for 24 to 36 hours, converting difficult-to-digest inulin into sweeter sugars and transforming the bulbs into a storable, valuable food. The turning point is death camas, a different and poisonous plant that can grow in the same habitat. Bulbs without flowers are especially unsuitable for casual identification, and no short video can make uncertain harvesting safe. Habitat loss has also reduced historic camas grounds, while wild collection may be restricted or illegal. Camas is therefore rare in several layers at once: restored meadow, legal access, correct identification, long preparation, and cultural knowledge. Which part deserves more attention in a future investigation? Comment safety or history. If Camas shows what happens when identification knowledge becomes scarce, one final tuber shows what happens when domestication remains Hopniss. Also called American groundnut, this climbing legume produces strings of tubers beneath damp soils in eastern and central North America. A single underground chain may contain tubers of different ages and sizes, which is useful for a perennial wild plant, but awkward for a machine designed to lift a uniform crop. The nutritional argument for domestication is strong. USDA material reports roughly 13 to 17% protein by dry weight, around 3 times the level of potatoes, and indigenous nations used the tubers long before European settlement. Early colonists also adopted them during periods of scarcity. Yet Hopniss never became another potato. Wild plants vary. Tubers may take years to enlarge. Harvesting disturbs a tangled underground system, and decades of experimental breeding have not produced an industry with the scale, consistency, and infrastructure of established root crops. Hopniss is not a failed food. It is evidence that nutritional value alone cannot complete domestication. These plants reveal that rarity is not one measurement. Ramps are limited by recovery time, fiddleheads by a temporary growth stage, coastal greens by habitat and access, old vegetables by cultural replacement, Sochan by the survival of a living tradition, hop shoots by labor, camas by identification and law, and Hopniss by incomplete domestication. The deepest pattern is that a wild vegetable may remain physically abundant while the research, permission, preparation, or local knowledge needed to use it becomes scarce. That is why serious research matters. Without it, rare foods are reduced to internet curiosities. With it, they become evidence of how ecosystems and human knowledge develop together. Which plant deserves a complete episode of its own? Comment its name below. Subscribe for the next investigation, where we will examine rare edible wild mushrooms, why many resist cultivation, and how researchers separate genuine food species from dangerous lookalikes.